Today I'm joined by my colleague, Gareth Garlick. You'll see him on the video there. I've worked with Gareth for many years. Gareth's got about 20 years experience in exploration and mining across the mining cycle, from exploration to resource estimation and mine reconciliation. Gareth was part of the consulting team that worked for Fission during the discoveries of J Zone and Triple R, and has a tremendous amount of uranium experience as well as experience across other commodities. If you do have any questions during the webinar, please just type those into the chat box and we'll be sure to get those answered for you at the end. We will be making some forward-looking statements, so please do refer to those. They are on our corporate deck as well as our website if you'd like any more detail. So today's webinar, we're going to give a quick corporate update. We did have a news release a couple months ago outlining our plans and activities for our various assets. And we've had a lot of questions recently around our uranium projects and lots of interest there. So we thought for today's webinar, we just take a deeper dive on those two projects, and we'll wrap up with the Q&A. So a snapshot of our projects: we have our two advanced gold projects, Goldfields in Saskatchewan and Ixhuatán in Mexico. Across those two projects are just over 2.9 million ounces of gold across all the categories. An enviable resource base for a junior like ourselves, and obviously puts us in a really good position to unlock value on those assets. And then just showing there also the Strike and Mermac uranium projects right next to the Goldfields projects. All our assets are 100% owned. So to recap on that news release a couple months ago, we did announce plans to evaluate opportunities to advance Goldfields. We recently completed a PEA on that project late last year, and our upside case at $19.50 an ounce produces a after-tax NPV of $460 million and an IRR of just over 50%. It's clearly a project that warrants advancement, and we're looking for a suitable opportunity to take that forward. We've engaged with a group out of London, NRG Capital Partners, and they're assisting us in that process to find a strategic partner for the asset or a potential sale with the potential to unlock value on that project. At our project in Mexico, it's got a gold resource there across the categories of around 1.7 million ounces. It has potential to expand that resource and discover gold at numerous other targets on the project. It's also underlain by this huge porphyry system with the copper potential not yet explored. So a really exciting asset for us, and we are working toward getting that asset moving in terms of field work. This year, we're focusing on community engagement, and we've had numerous meetings toward establishing access agreements. And then our Strike and Mermac assets, high potential projects. We think the best thing to do in our case is to look for a potential option or spin out of these assets. We don't want to be raising lots of money and diluting our shareholders against these really good gold projects. So that optional spin out has the ability to see that project move forward in a non-dilutive way to the company. So diving into the Strike and Mermac uranium projects, we're targeting these high-grade basement-hosted deposits that are typical of the Athabasca Basin. In the area, we're exploring the numerous high-grade showings, and our initial drilling validated the model we're chasing and discovered uranium in multiple drill holes. Just as a backdrop to our projects and a quick synthesis of the uranium market, for those who haven't followed it that closely, we've seen the uranium price really surge in the last month, moving from around $60 a pound to $70 a pound. And there are a few factors causing that, one being the coup in Niger, other supply disruptions in Kazakhstan, as well as some production cuts by Cameco. But notwithstanding those factors, the macro fundamentals are really aligning for a sustained bull market in the commodity. And that's really underpinned by the reactor build-outs that's happening at the moment. There's 60 reactors under construction, 110 planned, and 321 proposed. You can also add to that the development of SMRs that are developing at a rapid pace, with the first of those SMRs scheduled for delivery next year. There's smart money behind that, money out of Silicon Valley looking to generate cheap, reliable sources of power to power these AI supercomputers. So a lot of demand coming through, and that's all the projected demand is looking to exceed the current supply forecasts. On the supply side, there's been significant underinvestment in the uranium sector for the past 10 years. We haven't seen much exploration done, and the global inventories of uranium are largely depleted. So there's going to be a need for new projects to meet the supply deficit. And given the various geopolitical concerns nowadays and the security of supply that's needed, projects in safe jurisdictions are definitely going to attract interest, and certainly those of higher grade. And there's really no better place to go looking for that than Saskatchewan in the Athabasca Basin. So our projects are located just on the northern rim of the Athabasca Basin. We see these Strike and Mermac projects there. The eastern side of the basin has obviously seen the majority of the exploration, with numerous discoveries made. A lot of those are through thick sandstone cover, that sandstone being water saturated, which lends itself to more challenging mining conditions. A very notable development in recent years has been the discovery of Arrow and Triple R on the southwestern side of the basin. They're just off, and they're both in these basement rocks. And our projects are in a very broadly similar setting to that. Just off the basement, the Athabasca has been eroded off, and we have the potential for these high-grade basement deposits that sit within these competent basement rocks that are amenable to conventional mining methods. Just looking at our projects in a little more detail, we zoomed in here and we see the Strike and Mermac projects sitting right close to that Athabasca Basin edge, and that's really key. You want to be close to that unconformity, so it shows good preservation potential of these targets we're chasing. This area is very interesting from a historical standpoint. There's numerous high-grade occurrences throughout the area, many of them greater than 1% U3O8. There's also three notable uranium mines, Gunner, Lorado, Beaver Lodge. These types of deposits are all of this Beaver Lodge type, which is a bit different to what we find in the Athabasca high grades. They're largely associated with granites. And I should also point out, Chair, is just the established infrastructure in the area. We have the town of Uranium City. It's a functioning town. There's a road network, and there's also power available from the nearby hydropower stations. Now, the high-grade deposits of the Athabasca Basin are associated with these graphite-rich basement rocks, which are recognizable as EM conductors in geophysical survey. And since 2021, Fortune Bay has been assembling a dominant land package of these EM conductors or graphitic rocks in the Uranium City area. Now, despite this huge endowment of uranium in this area, the mines, the many occurrences, the EM conductors are still largely untested. And the reason for that is the exploration that happened historically largely during the 1950s to early 1980s was targeting these Beaver Lodge type deposits, which wasn't focused on the graphitic rocks. And it was during the late 1970s that the model to target EM conductors was developed. And it's at that time, a lot of the exploration shifted to the eastern part of the basin, leaving a lot of potential still in this area. Now, you can add to that these graphitic rocks in this area. One knows that graphitic rocks are quite soft, so they've been scoured out by glaciers, and all those graphitic rocks sit in the valleys, as our fieldwork has shown. And those valleys, they have a cover or overburden, so therefore the historical prospecting that was done, that a lot of it was done through radiometric prospecting, would not have detected uranium in these valleys where the graphitic rock sits. So it's a very compelling exploration scenario to chase these EM conductors in an area of such significant uranium endowments. At our Strike project, the EM conductors had never been tested previously. We were the first to do that. And at Mermac, there's only limited testing of these EM conductors, despite extensive drilling for Beaver Lodge type mineralization. To further explain the target concept, if we look at the schematic section on the left, we see that those graphitic rocks sitting in the valleys and all covered with this valley fill and overburden. It's in these graphitic rocks that you commonly find these higher grade deposits associated with the Athabasca Basin. And they typically occur around large structures or faults that propagate through the graphite, where fluids can penetrate. And these deposits can extend significant depths into the basement, up to 1 kilometer. So really nice targets to chase. You know, a good example of that is the Arrow deposit. Now, the focus of historical exploration was on these uranium occurrences, which are frequent throughout the area. They were found through prospecting. They're often trenched, they were drilled, but there's never a concerted effort to go and test these graphitic conductors sitting in the valleys. If we look at the plan view on the right, we interpret a lot of these outcropping uranium occurrences as bleed outs. Our field work has shown we see those sitting along cross faults very commonly, and those cross faults propagating through and intersecting the graphitic conductors beneath the valley floor. And we think these areas are prime locations to make discoveries. There's been numerous discoveries made in the basement where these cross faults intersect the graphitic rocks or conductors, and a really nice target to chase in the Uranium City area. I'm going to hand over to Gareth.
Yeah, hi everyone. So Dale's been talking a lot about the exploration model in general that we're targeting. On this slide, we're going to dive a bit more into the specific details of Mermac and why geologically we find it so encouraging. There's quite a lot going on in this figure, but the summary points I'd like you to focus on are that the project really is endowed with substantial lengths of these EM conductors. And geologically, they're sandwiched in between quartzites, which are shown in yellow in the map, and granitic rocks, which are shown as pinks and purples, which, when they're up against these soft graphitic rocks, they provide the really nice competency contrasts that we're looking for to go after these types of deposits. Some of the highlights from historical exploration are shown. The area is really just endowed with numerous high-grade occurrences. We visited most of these in 2022 and confirmed that they are all fault-hosted anomalies on the sides of the conductor valleys, and they're all associated with cross-cutting faults, which makes us really excited about targeting the intersections of these faults with the conductors. So to support the drill targeting, we carried out airborne VTEM, which is shown in the left inset, and high-resolution ground gravity in early 2022. These surveys gave us really good positional accuracy on the conductor locations, allowing us to drill test directly from the airborne dataset and avoid the need for more costly ground geophysics, and gave us the information we needed to plan a first-pass drill program. So our drill program was completed in fall 2022 and included 15 drill holes with over 3,000 meters of drilling. Our targeting criteria was to go after targets identified in the electromagnetic, magnetic, and gravity data sets, as well as structural targets, with the overall goal of obtaining a broad spatial coverage of the main EM conductors. As Dale said, they don't stick out the ground, and we'd never actually seen these rocks. And we wanted to be able to use the results to really vector in on the most encouraging areas. And the results we've seen, we feel, really validate the exploration model, confirming that we have all the right ingredients here. And we intercepted anomalous uranium in 6 of 15 holes, which is very encouraging, considering that we're not targeting the known historical occurrences, but we're testing a very different exploration model. We've summarized some of the highlights from the drill program in this figure. Anomalous uranium was intersected on all 3 conductors with maximum values of up to 0.18% U3O8 in short drill intervals. All of these conductors are now confirmed to represent strongly graphitic rocks with lots of good-looking structure and alteration. And the snips of uranium we're getting are associated with pathfinder elements that are typically associated with the high-grade Athabasca deposits. So pathfinder elements are the elements that occur in close association with these deposits, and they can occur as halos around the deposit. So seeing these is very encouraging. And all of the intervals are relatively close to surface, between 20 and 50 meters depth below surface, which is all painting a really favorable scenario for exploration here.
Just to jump in on some of the drill core for Mermac, really excited about what we're seeing here, noting that we're testing some new model here, and there's a few ingredients one needs to look for when targeting these high-grade deposits. The one obviously being the graphites, and you can see these dark rocks here, they're all loaded with graphite. You get really strong graphite. Secondly, you want to see some faulting in the graphites. We definitely have that, and that's going to provide fluids, conduits for fluids coming into these rocks to precipitate the uranium. The alteration here is also really encouraging in terms of we're seeing, just some examples here in hole 14. We're seeing some really nice clays developed in these rocks, diagnostic clays, colinite, illite, showing that the right fluids have come through and altered the rocks. We also see a lot of hematite, this red coloration in the rocks, showing that oxidized fluids have penetrated these rocks and setting up redox fronts for the precipitation of uranium. And of course, the uranium itself is the most encouraging thing. And we do see that, as Gareth mentioned, we're getting some shorter intersections, but also some broader zones of anomalous uranium, which is encouraging. Just the top right photo here shows some hematized quartzites in contact with graphitic rocks. And so exactly that type of setting we're looking for, where you get that competency contrast to create space. Working for Denison Mines as their VP exploration for many years, the flagship asset there is Wheeler River. That's now in feasibility stages. And at Wheeler River, you see this quartzite, the huge quartzite unit down the center of the property. And it's around that quartzite unit you've had these competency contrasts and the space creation for deposits that have been discovered there, like Griffin and Phoenix. So we're seeing similar types of setting here, and we feel it's a very, very encouraging setting to make discoveries for these high-grade basement-hosted deposits. Sorry, there we go.
Okay, I'll jump back in. This slide is summarizing some of the prospecting work we did in fall of 2022, when we went to verify and take a look at some of the historical occurrences for ourselves and prospect along some of what we consider to be the more prospective areas of the conductor corridors. One of the highlights from this work was this radioactive boulder that we found very close to a radioactive spring that was kicking out 15,000 counts per second on the super spec. So this boulder is rounded and transported, but it's a piece of mineralized basement rock and assaying at almost 9% U3O8. So if you consider the glacial transport, the ice direction from the northeast to the southwest, and the presence of the overlying this capping Martin Group basin sediments to the northeast, this boulder must have been sourced and scoured off from within the project area. So this huge endowment around the northern part of Armbruster is one of the areas that we really want to target more aggressively going forward. So considering the results that we got from our drilling and prospecting, we were really excited about everything we were seeing. So over the last year, well before this recent big uranium rally started, we've been closely monitoring the stakings openings and have been adding prospective ground where possible. We're really happy with what we've been able to add to the project, particularly considering how competitive these stakings are. And we find ourselves now in a position where we've almost doubled the project area, pulling in extensions of the prospective conductors that we're targeting, so southeast of Pitchvane, and to the northeast of Armbruster and Howland, where they extend under the unconformity of the Martin Group, which is part of the Athabasca Supergroup. We've also picked up new areas southwest of the Laredo mine, which look quite underexplored considering their location, and an area to the southeast also where there are additional EM conductors for exploration. So that wraps up a summary of where we are with Mermac. I'll hand back over to Dale now to talk a bit more about Strike.
So the Strike project was a really exciting acquisition we made through staking back in 2021. And what drew us to the area was, of course, the EM conductors, potential graphitic rocks that had actually never been drill tested. Also, there was numerous high-grade occurrences in the area showing an endowment, some really nice values picked up through historical prospecting. A lot of that focused on this Beaver Lodge type exploration. The most notable occurrence there is the Tenor occurrence, where there was over 1,000 tons mined in the 1950s with reported grades of 0.6 to 3.5% U3O8. Again, all these graphitic rocks or the EM conductors, they sit in these valleys so that they're not outcropping. And we're close to this Athabasca Basin edge. And just a little schematic here showing that sandstone sitting just off the lakeshore into Lake Athabasca, and us being close to that unconformity contact, targeting these basement-hosted deposits. Just looking at that tenor occurrence in a little more detail, we came in here, we looked at it in the field, we took some samples, verified the high grades. I guess the grades were exciting, but what was almost more exciting for us is the style of the mineralization and some of the geochemistry and alteration we found around it. You know, these all pointed toward Athabasca mineralizing system, part of that unconformity model, and really showed that this area, there likely had been these Athabasca mineralizing systems active at some stage. If we jump to the historical work, so what was done prior to us acquiring the ground, Cameco did hold the project for many years and had recognized it as a high potential area for these high-grade basement-hosted deposits. Cameco went about the various steps to develop targets toward testing that model, including a VTEM survey and including magnetics. There was some ground EM done. Cameco also walked along the valley sides, where along the edges of these conductors, they obviously couldn't see the conductors they covered, but did pick up lots of compelling geochem as well as clays in the area. So it all pointed to that, these systems being in place, but the conductors never were tested. I can't speak to exactly why Cameco let the ground lapse, but we all know in 2008 there was the financial crisis, 2011 Fukushima, and ultimately the ground lapsed in 2012 and created an opportunity for us to acquire it a few years later.
We carried out our first drilling campaign at Strike in 2022. That was the first time these conductors have been targeted and drilled. Our targeting criteria, similar to Mermac, was to test a variety of geophysical and structural targets across all three of the conductors. The image we're showing here is the new ground gravity that we did in 2022 and used as a targeting layer. And for targeting, we also used the really high resolution VTEM data that Cameco flew for us. And we completed 9 holes with just over 2,000 meters of drilling. The objectives of the program were, again, to validate the exploration model, so to confirm we're targeting the right types of rocks in the right settings, and to discover uranium, and we did achieve these. The first pass testing confirmed graphitic units with encouraging structures in all holes, bleaching, alteration, and pathfinder element associations, and anomalous uranium in 3 of the 9 holes, with the best result of 0.43% over 10 centimeters in hole S22013. And again, all of this is less than 100 meters vertically below surface. So like at Mermac, everything here is confirming that we're looking at a hydrothermal Athabasca Basin type mineralizing system that is associated with graphitic rocks. It's just the right ingredients you need to find these types of deposits.
The discovery in S2213 was very encouraging for us. Obviously, we were excited by the uranium we intersected, 0.43%, just over a short interval. But what really excited us was the setting for that mineralization. And a picture of the core is showing here, showing these darker rocks which have graphite. So we're in a graphitic unit, exactly what we're targeting. And there's good structure through that unit, as shown around where the mineralization occurs. We also see bleaching, which shows fluids have come through, as well as some clay developments, and this red, the hematite, which shows we near to a redox front. So this is the exact type of setting where you find these high-grade deposits. And although this intersection is not thick and high-grade, experience has shown, including my own, drilling deposits like Griffin and Husky, that one can move short distances away from intercepts like this, and that can quickly change into much thicker and higher grade intercepts. So a very encouraging start for us at this target, and definitely warrants follow-up along strike and down dip. If we look at that in plan and we see that conductor here running through this valley, it's all covered, but we do see a gravity low extending up to the northeast, which obviously warrants testing further along strike, as well as down dip of 13, and as well as testing to the the southwest.
So in terms of where to next, the first key to do that we see as follow-up of the more significant results from our 2022 drilling, we have several intercepts here with more than 0.1% U3O8, and we are planning out some along strike and down dip follow-up drilling for these occurrences. The second to do is to go after additional targets on the verified EM conductors. It looks like quite a cluster of drill holes that we've done with our 15 holes at Mermac and 9 holes at Strike. But just to emphasize, these conductors between the two projects span over 60 kilometers. So the drilling we've done is really just scratching the surface. Based on the prospecting work that we did, we're really excited about more aggressively targeting the northern part of the Armbruster corridor. But there are numerous geophysical and structural features that warrant drill testing on all 6 of these verified EM conductors. The new areas that we have acquired with additional conductors, our approach there will be to build drill targets with a very low cost approach of compiling the historical results, reinterpreting existing VTEM data, which we've already sourced, field prospecting, structural mapping, and geochemical sampling, all of which will put us in a really good position to decide on which of the new conductors to prioritize and go after with drill testing. And our drill permits are still valid through the whole of summer for both Mermac and Strike.
So just outside of the technical aspects for the projects, we're very fortunate to operate out of Uranium City, where the company has numerous facilities, and it prevents the need to put in big, expensive camps in remote locations. So thereby we can put more money directly into the ground. Shown here on the bottom left is our core logging facility. We also have a hot shack and other storage units, as well as our core yard. Inside of our core logging facility, there's the picture to the right here showing it's a very well equipped facility. It can manage up to 3 drill rigs at a time, so it's a really well set for future exploration programs. The company also has a house in Uranium City. There's other accommodation for rent. We have other facilities, warehousing, etc., and a full inventory of exploration equipment, scintillometers, GPSs, you name it, vehicles, skidoos. So we're really well prepared to operate a project here in future. And that wraps up the webinar. So thanks very much for your time and listening. We will make a recording of this available on our website, and we do intend to continue with these every quarter. So the next one will be in January 2024. Please reach out at any time. On our website, there are numerous ways to get in touch, and if you subscribe to our newsletter, you'll catch all the updates from the company. I'm now going to turn to the questions. Our first question, there are so many uranium explorers emerging in the Athabasca. How does one discern companies which have a real chance of discovery from those that don't? Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think it would come down to, 2 main things. The one would be obviously the projects. You need to look for projects that have potential, and these EM conductors or graphitic rocks are the known host rocks, or these deposits are associated with those. So companies need to have those as a starting point, and they need to have space along those to make a discovery. A lot of these conductors in the Athabasca, particularly on the eastern side, are quite well tested, and basically you're running out of room in a lot of areas to find meaningful big discoveries. I think also in terms of projects, looking at the sandstone thickness is quite important. A lot of discoveries, as I showed earlier, get made on the eastern side of the basin, and sometimes through some quite thick water-saturated sandstones, which ultimately makes challenges when it comes to mining. So projects that have EM conductors that are near the basin margins, so they're shallower, and if they're in those basement rocks, will be more amenable to ultimate mining. I guess the other thing that one should look for in companies is management. Teams that have had experience in the Athabasca Basin, and preferably teams that have been involved in discoveries and delineated deposits. I think you can't understate the lessons learned from discovering and delineating a deposit and becoming familiar with the models on how to find these in future. And I think we're quite fortunate at Fortune Bay with my experience with Denison Mines as VP Exploration. over 5 years, and then also Gareth's experience with fission. Second question, many discoveries get made in the Athabasca Basin, but there are still relatively few mines. Why is that? And what are the criteria that will ultimately turn discoveries into mines? I can perhaps just jump to a slide here quick to explain this. So, why are there few mines? And I guess we can see the numerous discoveries made on the eastern side of the Athabasca Basin. I think one key thing to know is that in this type of exploration, grade is not always king. Often these high-grade deposits get found, but they do sit, as we look at the section on the right, they do sit below considerable amounts of sandstone. And even though they're high-grade, they are going to be very costly to mine. And it's really only the large high-grade deposits that have been turned into mines that sit beneath the sandstone, and that's Cigar Lake and MacArthur River. We obviously also do see Denison advancing Phoenix with a new type of mining concept using ISR. That's really interesting. But otherwise, the deposits that sit at shallow depths, and particularly in these basement rocks, have a much better chance of becoming mines. And we know at McLean there's been mining. This diagram probably overstates how deep that is. A lot of it's much closer to surface, and they're high grade, but they're not very big, but have been mined. Obviously, Eagle Point's been mined, and then the developments at Arrow and Triple R look like they will become mines. So targeting in these types of areas is really favorable in terms of a long-term view of actually creating mines. And one doesn't necessarily even need these really high grades in these areas. Even if you're sitting at around 0.3, 0.4% U3O8, that's still 10 times the grades of what you'd find in a place like Namibia, where there's hard rock mining. So I guess in terms of Fortune Bay's projects, being targeting in these basement rocks with no sandstone cover, obviously we'd like to find very high grade, very large deposits, but even smaller deposits at grades just below 1% would likely still be viable. So, I hope that answers that question. And I don't see any more questions, so I think we're going to leave it at that. Please reach out if there are any questions. You can contact me directly at any point, and I'd just like to thank everyone for joining today.